Hey everybody, it's the waitingfornextyear.com podcast. We are back. It's a back-to-back podcast week with Andrew. How's it going, Andrew?
It's going great.
I hope everybody enjoyed our Cavaliers talk as well as our vocabulary lesson for cultural terms like stands, when you stand for somebody. Do you stand for any for Hugh Jackson? Did you stand for Sashi Brown?
I don't stand for any of them. I stand for Joe Thomas and Joe Thomas alone, and Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield. So it's funny to follow up the Cavaliers podcast this week with a Browns podcast, because I've never turned on a dime, and maybe I always would have turned on a dime between the season to the off season with this team, considering the assets that they have in terms of cap space, in terms of draft picks. But the John Dorsey thing, while certainly not a promise, but John Dorsey plus Elliott Wolf plus Alonzo Highsmith, it's really hard to feel negative about the most important part of the Browns right now, which is loading up the team with talent that makes sense altogether.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's jarring when you see like even national media saying things like, wow, like suddenly the Browns have a very competent, well-respected front office. And it's like, wait, we do?
Somebody even said that they went and now they've got a top 3 front office in the entire league.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we should walk back a little bit from that.
I don't even know what that means, but you know.
But
that would mean that the Browns are third to the Patriots, Ravens, Steelers ish.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
Yeah, they're going to have to prove that a little bit before I go there. But I'm with you though. I'm with you though that like it's okay to feel good about this. Like there's a lot. The Browns have not given us much to feel good about, and I'm so hesitant to, once again go down this. Well, it's not worked out with all these other guys, but these guys it might work with. I don't want to be that, but
we've done it too many times.
And even a guy like Ray Farmer, when all I heard was great things about how well respected Ray Farmer was.
He was in demand.
He was definitely in demand, and we went out of our way to make sure that we were going to keep this guy. He was going to be our guy, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, he's texting Kyle Shanahan on the sidelines, and he's gone in a couple of years. And I don't know, is he back in the league anywhere? Is he doing anything? Do you know?
It's one of the league is in such a way that I assume somebody gave him a job somewhere, because they all seem to get jobs somewhere.
Yeah.
Even George Kokinis ended up back with the Ravens.
Yeah. I just, look, I was ecstatic when Mike Holmgren came in. I was pretty happy when they brought in Joe Banner. I thought, Joe Banner had his stuff together. Ray Farmer I liked because I heard all these great things. So I'm trying to keep my guard up a little bit here, but
smart.
This isn't just one guy. It's not just John Dorsey. It's the collective, all these guys that they brought in, like you said, Wolf, Highsmith, and I feel good about it. Like I'm generally happy about that aspect of it. I think that especially when it comes to handling these draft picks, not to just directly tie everything back to the Cavs, but we kind of went through this where it was like, okay, Chris Grant knew how to accumulate assets, but he didn't know how to convert those assets into, a winning formula or into players, and how to flesh out a roster. And, I think that Sashi Brown actually did a decent job in acquiring assets. But he proved, he didn't know how to turn that around into a NFL roster. And so it's kind of like, well, okay, we still have a lot of assets. We have tons of draft picks, and now we have maybe some more trusted guys to be spending those draft picks. And I'm pretty happy about that.
I mean, these guys have a legit personnel track record.
Yes.
And honestly, I would even, just because Holmgren didn't work out well, I think the only thing that didn't work is Pat Shurmur. I mean, ultimately,
Yeah.
Mike Holmgren plus Tom Heckert was fine. It was
Yep.
Pat Shurmur in his first gig. We'll see how Pat Shurmur does in his second gig, but so it's like plans versus planners, and Sashi Brown, I think, had a reasonable plan, other than he didn't have enough. I think he was one of the worst hires in the history of professional football, because he was put in the spot that he was put in. Like there was
Right.
no, they had Andrew Berry there, but because they gave Sashi the 53, like, that guy doesn't know how to build. Like, I have almost as much football experience as he does, and I've got none. And that's not to say, like, oh, he's not a football guy, but, like, in a football organization, even one that relies heavily on analytics, you need football people in powerful spots. That I don't think it's controversial or anti-analytics to say that.
Yeah, and I think he viewed a lot of it as, he knew he wanted to do a teardown, and I think he viewed a lot of things in that teardown as numbers on a sheet of paper. And that's not, I don't mean that in a stereotypical, oh, he's just an analytics guy. I just mean he was always viewing these as sort of assets on a ledger sheet. And I think he understood like what he wanted to do. And I think he had a plan. And obviously we'll never know if at some point he could have turned that around, because there's a second half to that. When you do a teardown, you obviously then have to build back up. But
well, that's where I end up agreeing with guys like Doug Lesmerises, who say, well, obviously Sashi was going to pick a quarterback this year. Obviously he was going to pursue quarterbacks in free agency if he wasn't going to pick a quarterback. Like, he was going to solve the quarterback thing, and he got dinged for not solving it earlier, which I kind of get. I understand both sides.
Right.
Sashi would have improved this team this year too.
For sure, but I go back to I feel like the Joe Haden thing is kind of overblown a little bit, but at the same time, it's not. Like, it was indicative of him going too far. And, and especially when you hear Joe Thomas's comments about, what that did to the locker room, when these guys are sitting there saying, hang on, like, we have tons of cap space and we're just cutting this guy at the last minute. Like, why?
We're paying Brock Osweiler how much to not play?
Yeah, and we need to cut Joe Haden, a guy who meant more to the Browns than maybe his performance on the field. And that's where, I get what some of, we had a lot of guys that were waiting for next year who were saying, Joe Haden's not good anymore, and this, it doesn't matter. I'm glad they don't feel forced to play him anymore. And I kind of get what they're saying, but like, there's more to it than that. It's beyond just
Madden.
Exactly. Like, Joe Haden meant something more to the Browns, and to hear, anybody who's listened to that Tomahawk podcast episode heard both Andrew Hawkins and Joe Thomas talk about what Joe Haden meant as a teammate, and what he meant to that team. And fine, the Browns didn't win. I mean, I get so tired of people saying, well, it's not like the Browns won games with him. I hear that with Joe Thomas a lot too. Well, if he's so good, why? Like, the NFL doesn't work like that.
They can lose 16 games with him. They can lose 16 games without him.
And it's like, in the NFL, you only play one side of the ball. There's 22 starters, and one guy outside of the quarterback position typically doesn't make that kind of a difference, but it does matter.
By that kind of logic, Taylor Gabriel is a better player than Joe Thomas.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love Taylor Gabriel, but that's not true.
But he's not walking into Canton
no.
the first second he's eligible to, like Joe Thomas is. And
it's debate team, social media argument bullshit.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and that's, and it was just so damaging to the psyche. I mean, I can't even imagine, how are you as players, like what the message that's sending to you from the front office is that they don't even care about, about winning or anything. And I just felt like that was, I'm not saying it was the cause of anything. It was just like this glaring symptom of something deeper going on. with the way they tore things down. And I just don't know. Like I said, like I'm not like this has always kind of turned into are you a Hugh Jackson or a Sashi Brown guy? And kind of been sitting over here like not really either guy. Like I don't feel like either one of them really has done a particularly great job. And I don't know. I think that for all the dysfunction that we've seen with the Browns since they've returned, and it's only been heightened under Jimmy Haslam's reign of terror. But it's, I think that I think that these guys that we have now in the front office are at least going to stabilize things for now. Now, can they lead us to the playoffs and all that? We'll worry about that down the road. But for right now, these are people who can just sort of stop this bleeding and try and at least stabilize things. And I go back to, you talked about like, the Heckert and Holmgren thing. Like I felt like they did stabilize the franchise. Like
they really did.
And, I think maybe even you and I might have even talked about this at one point on a podcast, maybe even like many, many years ago. But like, I always kind of felt like maybe Randy Lerner wouldn't have even been able to sell the Browns had Holmgren not done such a good job of stabilizing them to a point that made it more attractive. Now, I mean, obviously, maybe that's really not the case because
no. You're 100% right. Where it was when they had to escort George Kokinis out of the building, and Mangini was running the organization by himself, and they had the summer camp, the football camp bus issue, and I mean, like all that stuff was going on. And Mike Holmgren put a lot of that stuff to rest. And yeah, he had the playoff ticket rant and he had all his own issues. But he really did solidify. He gave it, despite the fact that he wasn't working enough hours and smoking cigarettes and driving around in a golf cart. Like Tom Heckert knew what he was doing and he worked. Tom Heckert was not escaping that building. He wasn't, early, last one there, first one gone kind of a guy.
Yep. And I really felt like, even though the Browns didn't get to the playoffs, I really felt like Heckert transformed the roster. Mangini famously, running out, a lot of the talent and just bringing in character guys, but maybe who weren't talented enough to play. And I felt like Heckert really brought in talent and put together a roster that had some good players on it. And, obviously once the team was sold and, Jimmy Haslam was clearly going to go in a different direction and wanted to bring in, his guys as, that's your prerogative when you buy a team, obviously. But I just felt like there was a stabilizing factor there. And that's what I'm hoping we can get back to with this current front office. Only this time I hope they're around to not just stabilize, but then build on that and actually win some football games.
Imagine that. And I don't know. I'm not sure exactly which way they're going to go. It's really exciting because say what you want about Kirk Cousins, say what you want about Alex Smith. Those guys are known quantities. Guys like that aren't generally available. You're usually trying to find guys like if it's a somewhat impressive backup out of Tampa. Like the dude's name escapes me, but he signed in Chicago this offseason to buy time for Mitch Trubisky, Mike Glennon. You know, those are the guys that are usually available. And if by chance the Chiefs are willing to trade Alex Smith, if by chance Washington is not going to tag Kirk Cousins again, that has the potential, especially because the Browns have so many other resources. If they end up with one of those guys, if it's Alex Smith, I think they can still draft a first overall quarterback and plan on Alex Smith playing a year. If it's Kirk Cousins, maybe they don't have to draft a first overall quarterback and they could trade down not for next year, but for extra first rounders this year, or however it works out, and end up with Saquon Barkley or Minkah Fitzpatrick and like real weapons to give Kirk Cousins. I know Fitzpatrick isn't a weapon, but for Kirk Cousins, but they it's all there. And they could actually, Joe Thomas has been making the rounds, and he actually kind of said that if they end up with a legit quarterback and they've got such resources this offseason and so many guys are coming into year 2 or year 3, that like this could be one of those magical NFL turnaround years, which isn't really all that magical. It's a pretty known equation. Like if you have guys who are starting their second and third years and you add the right mix of veterans and guys with like superstar ability, obviously that's how you make that leap. And the Browns are like sitting there ready to make that leap.
I think that you're right. Like that to have a crazy turnaround isn't uncommon in the NFL. You know, you're right. It happens almost every year. Almost every year, a team that everybody wrote off, you know, has a huge turnaround. And, you know, even look at, you know, Jacksonville this year, you know, the turnaround that they've had. And it happens. And I think that it's fine for, you know, us to try to look at it that way. I will say, though, it might be a little bit different coming from 0-16 and, you know, 1-31 over the last 2 years. Maybe the Browns have a little bit further to go than everybody else. But I think you're right that there's a real sense of excitement because the Browns have options. Like, there's a lot that they can do.
Can I give you the glass half full version?
Yeah.
So the Browns seem like they have so much farther to go because they had maybe the worst quarterback room in the history of the NFL. And I don't hate DeShone Kizer, but he was so not ready. And he was backed up by guys who were not anywhere close to his caliber. And he was a second rounder. So I think, and it's easily the most important position in all of American professional sports.
Yep.
So if the Browns find that veteran who does not suck, and maybe even one who can play at a top 10 quarterback in the NFL level like Kirk Cousins, it's gonna cover up a whole lot of stuff. And this was my argument for Hugh Jackson, by the way, which wasn't really an argument for him as much as it was like an argument against the quarterback room that they went with this year. Like, I don't know that anybody. It's a really shitty thing to say, but like I sarcastically say things like, well, you know, Hugh Jackson would have done a lot better if he hadn't called all those red zone interception plays.
Right.
Like, nobody calls those. Nobody calls those, and nobody expects any quarterback in the history of the league to turn over the ball in the red zone the way DeShone Kizer did this year.
Outside of the New England Patriots, who have, bar none, far and away, in my opinion, the greatest football coach in the history of football. Outside of the Patriots, who have been able to sustain, you know, a loss to Brady and still have some degree of success, you know, make the playoffs. Outside of that, when teams lose their quarterback, they tend to turn to garbage. And we saw it happen this year with the Packers. The difference when Aaron Rodgers played versus I don't even remember who played when Rodgers. I don't know. It doesn't.
Brett Hundley.
Brett Hundley. The difference in the way the Packers looked, when just that one change in player, was so dramatic. I mean, the Packers looked every bit as inept as the Browns when Aaron Rodgers was gone.
Take the flip side. Take the 49ers adding Garoppolo.
The 49ers adding Garoppolo. I mean, you look at the Colts. When the Colts lost Peyton Manning, they were terrible. Then they get Andrew Luck, and they're good.
Jim Sorgi?
Yes.
And they signed Kerry Collins off the trash heap.
And then when Luck gets hurt, then the Colts are terrible. They're garbage again. And you see this time and time again in the NFL, like when the difference in the way teams look between when you have a frontline quarterback versus at best a run of the mill, but even a bottom tier guy, like it makes a huge difference. So I do think there's something to that. And especially, you know, I'm higher on Cousins than I am Alex Smith, but like, you know, if the Browns get Kirk Cousins and I know this is a big if, and I shouldn't even say it, but if Josh Gordon really does have his life put back together, and Josh Gordon is out there, that's a huge weapon. Njoku showed a lot of promise this year,
and he's super young.
You have a good offensive line. You got guy. You can make some draft picks, add some weapons. I think you're right. Like there can be a huge turnaround in the offense this season. So I do think that that's not outside the realm of possibility to see a dramatic turnaround if they can get the quarterback right.
Which is a big if, and of course they're going to replace the Crow.
Yeah.
But I think Duke Johnson is the key could be a key to any team that starts winning on offense.
Yep. No, I agree. And again, I don't want to sit here and I'm just not in the mood to sit here and project playoffs or anything like that. No. I'm just saying, if they could just get they have been trying to get this quarterback thing right since 1999, and really even prior to that. I mean, since Bernie Kosar, they've been trying to figure out the quarterback position, and they just haven't been able to do it. And if they could just for once fall ass backwards into a quarterback somehow, like the real thing, a guy who can play for multiple years and have some success, it's just going to make a world of difference for, the professionalism of the Browns, like to look like a professional football team. It'll just be night and day. I really believe that.
Yeah. And it's pretty unbelievable that we could be this hyped about a team that just went 0-16 and be this miserable about a team that's made the finals how many straight years.
Yeah, I guess that's the Cleveland sports way.
It's so weird though. It's so weird. I can't even comprehend. And like,
well, the Cavs thing is deeper than them just struggling to win games. I really feel like there's a deeper thing in that we really are feeling a sense that this is the end of LeBron in Cleveland. I think that the more that this falls apart and burns to the ground, the less likely LeBron is to come back. And I think that is adding a little bit to this thing. Whereas with the Browns, I don't know. What else do we have to do but be irrationally hopeful, I guess?
Yeah. I guess that's true. And the NFL is nobody has a year-over-year turnaround in the NBA unless they add LeBron James.
Right.
So, but the NFL, it is kind of common. Like, we should be hoping for it. When in the history of the league has anybody had draft assets and cap space the way the Browns have right now?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
It's got to be never.
Yeah.
I mean, to have the amount of cap space and have the number 1 and number 4 pick. I mean, Houston, obviously I wasn't rooting for Deshaun Watson to get hurt, and even if I was, it's not like I have that power in the universe. But the fact that they ended up with the number 4 pick and the number 1 pick is absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. I look back at the Lions when they went 0-16, and just getting Matthew Stafford, what a difference that's made for that franchise. No, they haven't won a Super Bowl or anything like that, but
long forgotten instant relevance.
Right, because long forgotten are the days of Matt Millen and them drafting a wide receiver every year, and just all the crazy moves they made and the dysfunction and just the sheer darkness that hung over that franchise. It's gone because some people scoffed at the contract that Stafford got, but you look at it from the Lions' perspective, like what that guy has meant to making the Lions matter in a way that they can say we're not as far off as we seem. Like, that's huge, and that's what we're chasing. That's what we're trying to get to, and we have assets to try to get that this season. So it's okay to have hope. Like, you you shouldn't expect it. I'm not saying you're saying everything's roses. Like, obviously, like this team's been miserable. This franchise has just been nothing but a train wreck. But you're just a quarterback away.
Dude, I'm trying to keep it in perspective too, because there's a part of me that gets really greedy, especially with the draft and the Browns having the number 1 and number 4 picks, where I look at a Kirk Cousins and I'm going, well, he might be a little bit better than the Red Rocket in Cincinnati. He might be kind of a first or second round NFL playoff quarterback.
Yeah.
And if they've got the number 1 pick in the draft, maybe they should skip out on Kirk Cousins altogether, because the number 1 pick of the draft means you have your selection. And if you're right, you're going to have a franchise quarterback who could win you the whole Super Bowl. And I'm in some senses, I think Sashi Brown didn't put enough weight in the quarterback. And in some senses, I'm putting too much. Like, you can win a quarterback with Kirk, or you can win a quarterback. You can win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins as your quarterback. You might have to surround him with more wide receivers and more running backs and a better defense, but he is good enough to win a Super Bowl. He's not Tom Brady, and he's not going to carry you to it, but he is good enough, I believe, in a scenario to take you to the Super Bowl. And meanwhile, I could talk myself into the idea where they should just skip out on Kirk Cousins altogether, because the higher ceiling of a number 1 overall draft pick, which could be fool's gold.
Yeah, I mean, it could. Yeah,
so
be
basically,
Josh Allen.
I'm just telling you guys, I'm an asshole and I don't know anything.
Yeah, no, that's our plight. You know,
it's the
that's
key.
our life.
It's the key to doing NFL criticism in 2018 is like just admitting what you don't know. There's so many people. I feel so lucky to have the people that we have at Waiting for Next Year, because I don't have to pretend or try. I don't have to try and fill those gaps that I'm incapable of filling. With guys like Gilbert and Jake Burns, and even between them, like, I never get the sense that Gilbert thinks he knows more than he knows, or that Jake Burns thinks that he knows more than he knows just because he knows more than somebody like me.
Right. But I will say, though, my whole love for Baker Mayfield is all Jake Burns' fault. So I did not have – I mean, I was always impressed with Baker Mayfield, and, I always thought very highly of him. But
all he does is
I always just thought I was just an
like
idiot. What do I know? And Jake gave me validation of that. And so I'm Team Baker all the way.
And let's be honest, Baker Mayfield – there are scenarios in the NFL where Baker Mayfield becomes a Pro Bowler. There are scenarios in the NFL where Baker Mayfield becomes Tim Couch. It's not. These guys aren't becoming who they become in a vacuum. Like Marcus Mariota becomes a different player if he's drafted by Kansas City. Becomes a different player if he's drafted by fill in the blank, Houston.
Yeah.
The fact is he was drafted by Tennessee, and that's who he's become, or so far.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it, for sure.
But we have this idea that, well, I liked Johnny Manziel because I liked his anticipation and the way he read a field. Like, I can't be held responsible for the way he fell off the tracks. Like, I don't get to interview a guy like that. I don't get to talk to the people who ran the Peyton Manning passing camp. I don't get to talk to the girl who taped his ankles when he was at Texas A&M. The Browns have that opportunity. So it's not... So my opinion only goes so far, and even Jake Burns, he knows that he doesn't get to do the substantial background work on Baker Mayfield that the Browns and their former FBI or former Secret Service, whatever, whoever their security people are, they get to do all that. We don't.
Yeah. No, you're right. And that's why we can have our opinions and things like that, but at the end of the day, you're right. We don't know anything.
Which is really fun. It's kind of liberating.
Yeah. Well, because it's easy to fall back on when we're proven wrong too. Like, just go back and say, "Well, I didn't know anything anyway." So.
Well, I just remember the night that the Browns drafted Justin Gilbert. I was on Channel 5 their Dogs on the Run show with Andy Baskin back in the day. I used to do that show all the time.
Yep.
And they were like, "So, what do you think of Justin Gilbert?" And I was like, "Well, he seems really athletic, and he seems like he's a big corner. Seems like he would fit a need, especially in a Mike Pettin defense."
Yeah.
Every single thing I said was absolutely 100% without a shadow of a doubt true.
Yep.
And Justin Gilbert turned out to be one of the biggest draft busts in the history of the NFL draft. Was I wrong? Was I stupid? Did I speak out of turn? No, I just didn't know anything.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know what else I can add to that.
And there's no way I could have known that he didn't care about playing football.
Right. Well, and that seemed to be apparently be a pretty well kept secret because there was a lot of optimism around Justin Gilbert.
But apparently
even into training camp,
everybody at Oklahoma knew that and even at training camp, those first couple days, that dude is a physical freak. He's on a different level.
Yep. I remember people talking about it. Like
Buster Screen's Mr. Tryhard, and that gets you a long way in the NFL.
Yep, absolutely. Especially in the NFL. Like, if you don't have that love, like you're just not going to have success in that league. There's no way you can fake it in the NFL. It's so physically demanding that if you don't have that love, that drive, the passion, desire, that has to be there. And maybe that's one of the harder things to figure out about somebody when you're just interviewing them, at the combine or whatever. But yeah, I mean, you have to have that.
No, and that idea that you can know how a guy. You talk to him, you talk about his family, you talk about his background, you talk about his friends and the different things, but the idea that anybody's going to know what a guy's going to be like once you hand him $7 or $8 million in guaranteed dollars.
Well, because he's not going to tell you.
No, he doesn't know.
He's not going to say. He's not going to sit there and say, "Yeah, I don't know if I love football." That's not going to happen. I don't know if I really want to work.
And that's the Trent Richardson story. He had no idea that how much he was going to miss the structure of college, or how he was not going to be able to handle the people begging him for money and the hangers-on. Like, he was not prepared for that part of the game, and maybe the Browns should have seen that. But Trent Richardson is a good kid, is a good man. Like,
oh, absolutely.
He was not an evil dude. I don't believe he was ever an evil dude. I don't think he ever wanted to be anything but the best running back in the history of the National Football League. And he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. He couldn't handle the pressures of having that money and having people beating down his door and the people wanting things from him all the time.
Yep. And none of this is an excuse for the Browns, by the way, either, because there are it's not to just say, well, gee, nobody can do it, because clearly there are teams who excel at figuring this out and understanding, how to spot that, or to, just understand how guys are going to fit into their culture. And maybe it's beyond just seeing it in them, but maybe part of it is just the culture of the franchise, that they're better equipped at helping bringing in a rookie and walking him through what it means to be a professional and making that transition. So it's probably a little bit of all of those factors, but there are teams and franchises that excel at it. So I'm not trying to say this as an excuse for the Browns, like, well, gee, it's all just dumb luck and, golly, they just had bad luck. And no, I mean, that's not, it is a reflection on the Browns that they keep finding these guys. But I'm just saying, what I'm agreeing with is, from our perspective, especially as fans, we certainly can't know that. And I do think it's a difficult thing for a front office guy to understand. Maybe that's harder than even breaking down game tape. Like, a lot of these guys, they know football inside and out. They can watch all the tape in the world and know what a guy can and can't do on the field. But what separates some people in front offices is perhaps this ability to see through that. And, like I said, understand what a guy's made of, and to understand how to have that structure in place within the franchise that a guy can walk in. I always remember, I saw an interview on, Santonio Holmes. He was an Ohio State guy, so I followed him pretty closely. And, he went to the Steelers, was drafted by the Steelers. And he talked about, I distinctly remember still to this day, one of the first interviews I saw with him. And he talked about, when the Steelers brought him in and they gave him the jersey and they talked to them about the Steeler way, and they talked about the history of the franchise, and immediately there were veterans talking to him about what they do and they don't do there, and he just said he felt a personal responsibility to live up to that. And that's something you don't have with the Browns, right? Like, the Browns did not have that for Trent Richardson to walk into, and that can be a hard thing to turn around. So,
and that's something that Sashi Brown might have shipped out the day that he let Joe Haden go.
Exactly.
All right, before we check out, let's tell everybody about YouTube. So YouTube changed the deal. Coming into the new year, they gave us about 60 days, less than 2 months' notice. It was less than 60 days. Less than 2 months' notice. They changed the deal. We don't make a lot of money on YouTube, but we make pennies, sometimes dollars, and we were trying to build it as a channel, both for the podcast, both for standalone videos, and we were having a lot of fun doing it. But in order to make it worthwhile, we need to qualify for YouTube's new tiered participation structure for whatever revenue or whatever. So they changed the deal. We now need 1,000 subscribers. As you're listening to this, we probably have over 750 subscribers. We're up to, as I'm saying this right now, we're at 739, but I'm not posting it till later. So it's got to be well over 750. Maybe we're on our way to 800, but we need 1,000. And so if you have a YouTube account, please go search for Waiting for Next Year, no spaces, all one word, Waiting for Next Year. Find our channel, subscribe. We promise that we're going to try and build that channel. Yeah, there will be some podcast posts, but we're going to try and build that channel with stuff that we find interesting and entertaining. Jeff Nomina does a great job. Jim, Pete, Mike Hattery. I'm sure, other guys, I'm leaving people out, but we're trying to build that channel. We're enjoying building that channel. And in order to do so, we need your help. We hate asking for help. I despise asking for help. I want to do everything for myself all the time. But alas, this is an audience-driven business. It's not a very good business, but it's an audience-driven business. So please help us out. Please go and subscribe. Andrew, did I miss anything about the Browns? So wild card question. If you had to bet 100 of your own dollars, which is a meaningful amount of money, on the question, will DeShone Kizer ever start and win a football game for the Cleveland Browns? Yes or no? Would you bet yes or no with your $100, even odds?
I will bet no.
Woo. Even odds, no.
Yep.
Okay.
I will bet no. I think that there's a very good chance that the Browns get Alex Smith, and I think they will draft a quarterback to go behind him. That's what I think is going to happen.
See, I see that. I see a scenario where DeShone Kizer isn't cut, isn't traded, is kept around, but is the third string quarterback, maybe even for a couple of years. And I still am with you. I think I would still bet my $100 no, because I think they will always have at least two options before they get to DeShone Kizer. I don't think he dresses for most games next year somehow, some way.
And I like Kizer. This isn't a slight on him. I like him as a
He's a good kid. He was a try-hard.
And boy, he stood up and took responsibility in a way a lot of other people around the franchise didn't. Not just this year, but even just historically, since the Browns have come back, there's been a lot of cover your ass going on, and a lot of fingers have been pointed over the years. And Kizer stood up and took responsibility for the losses and for the mistakes he made, and showed a lot of poise and leadership. And I like him for that. I just think he was put in an unfortunate situation, and the Browns have too many assets to improve there, and I think they're going to try to capitalize on that. So
I think you're right. I think that's a perfect place to stop. Thanks so much, man.
Yep, anytime.
All right, everybody, thanks for listening. Make sure you check out the YouTube channel. Make sure you tell a friend about the podcast. We'll talk to you next time. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.